Look at that fuzzy little mic.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Go ahead and get started here. We are streaming on YouTube, and we have a couple people joining us. So my name is Matt Morrison. I'm a software consultant here at Source Allies. Been using Python since about 2009. Was involved with Piowa previously, back before 2020 and the before times. But welcome, everyone. Let's see, a couple of housekeeping things. So we have restrooms through the doors right there. Just follow the signs. There's Wi-Fi. The code is over there. There's also pizza drinks over there. There's more drinks through the doors here. Help yourself. Yeah, huge shout out and thank you to Source Allies. And with that, I would like to have Ben say a few other things about Source Allies. Then I've got a few other housekeeping things I'll throw out there, and then I'll hand it over to Mike. So here is Ben.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Applause. Wow. Okay. That's a lot to live up to already. Hey, I'm Ben. I work here at Source Allies as a recruiter on staff. Super excited to welcome everybody to Source Allies in the revamp of Piowa. I mean, come on. How awesome is that? I grew up being bored in math class, and I would sit there and code games on my TI-89. And then I get here at Source, and I'm, the bug bites you. And so I've been teaching myself Python on the side for the last year or so. So this has been huge for me because I'm actually going to be at a user group where I can maybe understand a few things that are being set up here. So I'm super duper excited about that. Super excited to have you here. We host a lot of user groups here at Source. AI, Iowa, DevOps Des Moines, Web Geeks, SideJug, now Piowa. So check us out on LinkedIn. Join all of our socials. If you have something that you want to talk about at one of these events, let us know. If you would like to hear about a specific topic, let us know, and we might be able to find that for you. But we just are really happy to be involved in the community, and afterwards, love to talk to you and shake your hand. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Ben. Okay. So let's see. So yeah, we are streaming on YouTube. If you have a question, and I'll leave it up to Mike as how he would like you to ask questions, but so that you can be heard on stream, if you have questions, I have a mic, so just throw your hand up. I'll come around and make sure that you can be heard by the stream. As Ben mentioned, we are looking for speakers. So if you have a New Year's resolution, if you want to give a talk, you one day want to speak at PyCon or something like that, we're a great place to test that out at. I left note cards out and pens everywhere. So if you have a suggestion of a topic that you would like to hear, if you have a talk that you would like to give, jot it down, put some kind of way to get a hold of you on there. Or if you have any feedback at all about the group, the facilities, the food, whatever, any feedback whatsoever, feel free to jot it down and just leave it on the table, and I'll pick that up and we'll use that to build a group going forward. Let's see what else. Yeah, so looking for speakers, we're all set until probably April. So if you want to commit to it now, you got plenty of time to work out the details. And let's see what else. Okay, two other quick things. So one, I just saw this online today. Yesterday is the 31st anniversary of Python 1.0. So how about that? 31 years old. Okay, one last thing before I hand it over to Mike. So I have a daughter, and she gives me a toy every day that I go to work, every time I go to a user group. So today, she gave me this, and I would like to take a selfie with myself, with all of you in the background. And so if you don't want to be in my selfie that I show my daughter later, you can duck or turn your face away, but I'm just going to do this real fast. All right, 1, 2, 3, Piowa. All right, I think that's all I had. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and I will hand it over to Mike. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. I've got just a touch of a cold. I'm trying really hard not to cough into this thing. All right. So today I decided to talk about creating a weather app in your terminal with Python. This isn't super beginner friendly. Maybe I should have started off our kickoff with a more beginner friendly tutorial, but I'll try to break it down as much as I can. And if you do have questions, you can ask, as long as we don't, bog it down the entire thing a ton. I'm totally fine with doing questions. If you guys get too many questions, I'll probably tell you, write them down on the note card. We'll talk about them at the end. But, overall, I think that's okay. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about in this particular talk. We're going to talk about terminal packages in Python. We're going to talk about what is textual. We'll install it. We're not going to do the hello world because I don't have time for that anymore. I'll talk about how you create this app. Because I know that I saw some people on our Discord channel was talking about they're beginner. I don't know, how many beginners do we have here in Python? Okay, good number. So it's a good thing to back up and just talk about how do you even create an app? Because I know when I started out, it was really hard for me to take the syntax and turn it into something useful. I can print hello world all day long. I can create a function, but how do I actually put all that together so it actually does something useful? So we'll talk a little bit about how I broke this problem apart and turned it into something that was kind of useful. This is technically from a book I'm working on about textual package. So I just kind of took that chapter and adapted it into this. Let's talk a little bit about terminal packages in Python. So you may not know this, but Python has over 240 standard libraries. That means it has batteries included. There's a ton of them. One of them is curses. That is actually a terminal package in Python. It's got quite a bit of documentation, but it stinks. So it's really hard to use the curses library, in my opinion. I once did a code challenge for a job interview a couple of years ago, and they had written what amounts to an Excel spreadsheet with curses, and it was really cool to see what they'd done, but I don't know how they did it. That was really confusing. Another popular, or I should say actually a popular one, is schematics. This one uses your typical ASCII text character set. It looks kind of old school. In fact, I was going to try to show that. See if I can bring it up here. They have some good examples. Unfortunately, they're videos, so I'll try not to. But they look kind of like this, kind of that old school 80s look and feel. Not really modern, though. So the one that we're going to talk about is called Textual. And Textual lets you create crazy applications in your terminal. You can make buttons. You can create a SQL. Well, this is a DuckDB ID in your terminal. This guy created a flame show for a flame graph viewer. Let's see, there's another good one in here somewhere. Oh yeah, tip top. It's basically another top, but written in Python for your, so you can see what processes are running using Textual. Somebody created a piano. That's cool. You can do that all in your terminal too. All right, enough of that. Just to give you an idea, what is it? What is Textual? It's a rapid application development framework for Python. It's built by Textualize.io, which is a company that received VC funding. Basically, it's 1 or 2 people at this point. He used to have 4 or 5. The person behind it is Will McGugan. A lot of people know him for the Rich library, which is kind of gets you do a colored output. In fact, I think they use Rich in idle now, like the idle that's in the terminal for some of the Rich output, like when you have an error. I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, even though Rich isn't part of the standard library, a lot of packages use it, including Textual. One of the cool things about Textual is you can create a sophisticated user interface all in your terminal, and you can also run it in a web browser if you want to. I don't think I did this. Let's stop. Let's go back to. So on the way over here, I was thinking we should talk about why you'd want to use it, a terminal app versus creating a GUI. So Textual creates what they call a TUI, a text-based user interface. A GUI is a graphical user interface. Python has a ton of them. In fact, the standard library comes with one called tkinter. It's based on the TCL library called Tickle. And it's cross-platform, it's great, but it has a limited widget set. And a widget is, kind of like a label, like this is a label of string. If you go to your web browser, you'll see some buttons on there. Those are widgets too. All of those widgets are created with pixels. And the reason I bring this up is Textual does not use pixels. Because you're in a terminal, you don't get that. It's all text-based. So it's characters and it's lines. So you have characters for your columns, lines for your rows. You can't get that pixel perfect UI that you could get with like tkinter or pyqt or whatever. That's okay, you don't need it. The point of Textual isn't just to create a TUI in a terminal. One of the big uses for it is in SSH. So when you have servers that you're running headless, you don't have a windowing system, you don't have X server, for example, you can SSH into it and tell it to forward the terminal to your local terminal, and it'll do the UI in your terminal, even though it's remote. And so you can have that user interface that looks like a GUI, but it's in your terminal, even when you're remoting into someone else's computer or server, or your own, of course. So I think that's like the biggest use case for it. I've used it at my job. I've used it, for my book. It's just a lot of fun to play with. Anyway, so I was thinking, I want to have 10 projects in my book. One of the projects, I wanted to hit a web API. So I'm like, what's a good web API that I can hit? You could go to a lot of government websites and download, statistical data, parse it with pandas or what have you. But on your computer, you're always seeing weather reports. Even it's like built into Windows now, it'll tell you what the temperature is outside. And I thought that'd be kind of fun. Let's see what's out there. And so I looked for some open APIs because some of them are paid. You could probably use like NOAA's website, the weather.gov, some of those other ones. Some of them require API keys. So you have to give up some of your information so that they have your email address and your name potentially. Or you can use something called OpenMateo, which is an open source one, and it lets you have, I believe, 15,000 requests per hour free. They have a paid tier if you need more than that, but I don't know why you need that for a hobby project. So I went with that one. There's actually several Python packages that try to wrap it using the requests package. I'm just going to use requests itself because I think it's easier than installing even more dependencies. And their documentation wasn't that great, whereas requests documentation is pretty good. So I'm just going to use requests for this. The other thing I wanted to do when I was thinking about this is I'm like, how do I tell my app my location so that it actually gives me useful data? Because I don't want to just say Altoona. I live near Altoona, but Altoona is both here in Iowa and there's also one in Pennsylvania. And so you need a way to say which one you're talking about. The obvious answer in my mind was to use a postal code. So I went looking for a postal code, and I was reading the OpenMateo documentation, and OpenMateo doesn't take postal codes. It takes latitude and longitude. So I needed to bridge that gap somehow. To bridge it, I found a library called pgeocode. I think I have it here. It's actively maintained, but you can see they don't have like a 1.0. It lets you enter a postal code for pretty much any country. They support a ton of different countries. Probably can't see it, but I'll try to make it bigger. You can kind of get a feel for it. There's quite a few different countries they support. They also let you do location aware. So you could type in like Altoona, and it will search and return multiple results. I just went with the zip code because that's easier for me to code quickly in a demo. But that'd be a cool enhancement if you're feeling, like adding that, because it really wouldn't be that hard to, basically query this, say Altoona or Paris, for example, because there's a Paris, Texas and a Paris, France. You could ask it, hey, give me this data, and you pick it from like a combo box or something. All right. Anyway, I forgot to mention this. There was a link at the very beginning where I have all the code and the slides for this. Basically, we're going to pip install requirements. I'm not going to do all that because it's boring, but you get PGO code, textual requests, and there's also a textual dev package. And the dev package gives you the dev tools for textual, which is really useful when you're trying to figure out how to use it. And I'll show you a couple of those tools in a minute. All right, we already talked about that. So let's just jump into creating a weather app. Originally, I was going to try to type out a bunch of this code, but then I realized we don't have time for that. So I created just kind of a shell to kind of give you guys an idea of what's going on here. So we import our PGO code. Can everyone see this okay? Do I need to make it a little bit bigger? Okay, good, sweet. We're going to use Rich. Rich gives us the ability to color our text in the terminal. That's why I'm using that there. Then the rest of this is all textual imports. I'll talk about what they do as we get to them. And one thing you'll find out when you deal with any kind of weather data, they talk about WMO codes all the time. It's kind of hard to Google for, actually. I spent probably 10 minutes just trying to figure out what WMO meant, but it stands for Weather Meteorological Organization. And I guess they maintain those codes. I basically turned them into a dictionary so that I can use them for whatever they are, because this is the kind of code you'll get back from the OpenMateo. And to make it more fun, I'm going to use a terminal that supports emoji, so we can convert the WMO to emoji to make it a little more colorful and interesting. Let me grab some code here. I don't remember what's in this file. Oops, wrong way. There we go. All right. Do we have any questions so far? Everyone good? Nice. Okay, so in Textual, you can create your own custom widgets. Remember I was talking about, a widget that can be a label or a button or what have you. Well, we're going to create our own little custom widget because when you create a weather app, a lot of those websites that you go to, weather.gov, whatever, weather.com, they'll show you the current temperature, and then they'll show you a 3-day or a 7-day or a 10-day forecast next to it. We're just going to stick with 3-day for now because it fits on the screen better. But I wanted to create a widget for each zip code that would show all that information lined up next to each other. So to do that in Textual, you create a horizontal group. And what that is just a container that you put your widgets into. And it tells Textual, I want these groups to be lined up from left to right across your screen as a group. So you just subclass that. We're going to pass in our postal code. And then there's all this boilerplate here. I'm going to create a vertical container as well. So in the vertical container, we'll have several labels for the current temperature and location, and then 3 more vertical containers to contain the 3-day forecast. So +1, 2, and 3, which you can see I have a typo here. Oops. There we go. It's a problem with live coding. You always have mistakes. Okay. So the idea here is when you create this widget, it's going to create these labels with just default labels in them. And then we need to query our OpenMateo web API, which reminds me, we should go over there and check that out. So let's go over to OpenMateo. I can spell it right. Mateo. All right. Let's see, where is it at? Try the API. Here we go. So you can go in here and you can choose your latitude and longitude. You can choose how many of these variables you want to have in the results that you get. I think I'm using precipitation, rain, showers, snowfall, weather code, because that's useful for the label. There's also, I think, a 7-day or a 3-day forecast. I don't remember where that checkbox is. Maybe it's down here. You also get the current weather. And anyway, as you check these out, trying to find it, this API URL will continue to grow as you check them, so you know how to create your API URL. So I checked a bunch of different things on there and ended up with this crazy URL you can kind of see here. You can see embedded in it, they have a latitude and longitude, so I'm going to pass those in. I'm going to grab the current temp, the max temp, the daily weather code. You can set the temperature unit to Fahrenheit or Celsius. You can set the time zone if you want. Lots of different things. I didn't make all of these configurable in this particular one yet, but I actually have a different version of this code that lets you change like Fahrenheit and Celsius, for example. It wouldn't be hard to add time zones, I don't think. Python comes with a time zone module, so you could do that. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about how Textual works. When you create a widget, the first thing it does is it calls compose. Yes?
Could you explain what the work annotation does back up on that function you were just?
Yep, we're going to get to that next.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, cool. But we have to start here first. So compose is where it creates all the widgets, right? And after Python, or after Textual has done all the composing of the widgets and getting them into memory, it goes to mount them onto the screen. That's what onMount is. And so we can override that and say, do something else. You can let it do its own thing if you want. But in this case, I want to do something special. I want it to update the weather. So if I don't call this, it's just going to leave my default labels on there, which are kind of boring. They don't actually tell you anything useful. So update weather is going to call this decorated update weather function or method. And at work, we'll create a thread. So this function will run in a thread. It's an exclusive thread, and you can set a group. If you don't set a group, it will run in the main thread. So in a GUI, GUIs have I shouldn't say the main thread, it has a secondary thread. The main thread is basically a wait loop. It just waits for the user to interact with your UI. If I didn't set the group, this would just go into the secondary one. And if I call this multiple times, you could actually kill previous threads because it doesn't know that it should create a new group. So I just created a group here called weather. And then because I know that calling a web API is slow, it's going to block my UI. It's going to make the web, it's going to make it not responsive. You can click on it. You might even see a spinning hourglass or something that says, hey, my app doesn't work now. It's broken. A lot of users freak out when they see that and they'll close it. You don't want them to do that. So you put it in a thread. This is really common in tkinter, PyQt, wxPython. They all use something similar to this, but not with a decorator. They have their own ways of doing it. Anyway, you can grab the current worker. So this is going to grab the current worker thread. And the reason we do this is that you want to check and see if someone has closed the app prematurely. So if the worker gets canceled, you don't want to update the UI because the UI no longer exists. So you grab the current worker, and then down here you check to see, did it get canceled or not? If it didn't get canceled and the response code from the API was good, we grab the JSON from it, and then we call another method called updateUI from the thread. Back up here, I just want to point out, I have pgeocode set to US. I have no idea what nomaton means, but this is where you set up what country you want it to work with. So you can set it up. I think you set it up with multiple countries. I just set it up with US to make it simple. I was experimenting with Canada because I ship books to Canada sometimes, but I could not for the life of me figure out why their codes just don't work in this particular package. I mean, it is 0.5, so maybe it's just broke right now. But France works. I tried France. You can get good weather data from or not weather data, but postal codes from France. So that's kind of fun. Anyway, let's go down to the update UI part. Let's see, we're going to pass in our location, which is the postal code object we get from PGO code. And we're going to pass along our weather data, which is basically a list of dictionaries or a dictionary of lists, I forget which. And we're going to extract what town it is, that's the place name. We're going to grab the state code. We're going to grab the current temperature from our weather data, our WMM code. We're going to convert that to emoji. This is using the rich library, so you do text from markup, and then you can pass in your emoji string, and it'll convert it. Then we stick that emoji along with the WM code status from the dictionary up above, which says, light rain, it's snowing, it's sunny. So I'll have an emoji plus, sunny probably for today if we were to Google Des Moines, or not Google, but use this. And then to actually update the labels, you use something called query one. So when you query for something in this code, there's actually multiple ways to do it, but this is the one you see most often in the documentation. You call query one, and then you use a hashtag and a selector, because Textual uses CSS and underneath the covers to help style things as well as to help query things like the widgets. So if you go hashtag location and you scroll back up, you can see that I have IDs like +1 temp, current temp, location underscore. That's what it's grabbing in that query one. It's grabbing the very particular one in its postal code. And then if we go over to the right a little bit, we call the update method on the label and pass it along our text, which has our town and state code. And you can change the color. So I'm making a magenta one and a gold one, just kind of making it colorful, like I said. And then I just loop through my tags, +1, 2, and 3, which we had up above. Those tags are the IDs. So I just do tag underscore postal code, update with whatever. All right, we're getting close to the end of this code. This just creates that widget, that line of your weather data in your app. But we haven't created the app yet. Fortunately, there's not very much code to the app itself. Let's make maybe 30 lines. So here we create a weather app. You subclass from the app superclass. Again, you create a compose. So in this case, we're going to create a header, which is basically the title along the top of the terminal screen. You choose to put in a horizontal input and button. The input is for the postal code. The button is to actually load the weather. And then we add a vertical scroll. So what that does is it's going to add those rows of weather data into the vertical scroll one at a time, and it'll stack them. And then if you get too many to fit in your terminal, you can scroll and see all the different weather pieces that you have loaded up. Okay, now we have our button press. So @on lets us bind to an event, in this case, the button pressed event. And then we use, again, that hashtag. So hashtag weather matches up with add weather up here. So only this button will call this method. If I had other buttons on here with other IDs, they would ignore them, so to speak. Then we grab our value from our input widget. That's the postal code, assuming that I typed in a valid postal code. I don't have any error handling here, so it would probably crash if I typed in a bad one. And then we tell it to mount the weather app that we created earlier, which is that horizontal group up above with the weather postal code. All right, so this brings up another topic. Right now I'm using PyCharm, and if I were to run this, it'll try to open the app in PyCharm's terminal. PyCharm's terminal is not a full-featured terminal. It's basically something they cobble together. It doesn't actually use like the underlying OS's terminal at all. And it doesn't have any kind of mouse input. Textual supports mouse input, so if I want to click on a button, it doesn't work in their terminal. And sometimes it just kind of freaks out and it just like scrolls constantly. You don't actually get to see your TUI very well in that. If you guys want to go searching on the Discord channel, someone figured out how to use tmux and some JSON code in VS Code to make it load in a basically debugger so that you can load it in there using tmux somehow. I'm not sure how they did it. I didn't have time to investigate that for this talk. But that looked like a cool way to rapidly run through stuff like this. So anyway, what I typically do is I just open up a terminal and I run my code. So let's see if I can do this correctly. We'll use my logic version, which has more full-featured. We'll get a this use 50010, which is an Ames zip code. It'll load. You'll get all this wonderful data about it's 46 up in Ames right now. You get a sun emoji. It's mainly clear up there. You can see it's going to be overcast tomorrow. Might have some dense drizzle, in 2 days, maybe some light rain. This works with pretty much, any. Let's see, is it? Trying to remember another. I think this is a Texas one. Let's try this one. Yep. So if I want to see what Texas is doing, see how much warmer it is over there. It's only 56 degrees. They're not that much hotter this time of year, which is strange for Texas. Usually they're in their 70s at least. But you can see every time I hit add weather, it's going to add this horizontal group here. And eventually, if you type in enough of these, you'll end up hitting the limit and we can end up scrolling. So let's just put up a couple. I think that was an invalid one. Probably shouldn't do that. Let's see, I know this is the valid one. Let's do that one. Okay. So now you can see I have 4 different weather things on here. Now, this only runs once. I'm only making one API request right now. So a great enhancement would be to add a way to call update weather periodically. Textual has this built in. You can actually do this easily. It's called set interval. And you basically just say however many seconds you want it to update and what function to call. So I could add that. In fact, I have a version in the talk slides. You can go download that does that. And I set it to like every 5 minutes because I'm never going to hit 15,000 requests, even if I hit it, even every minute for that matter. And those I loaded up a ton of zip codes, I guess. So anyway, that's kind of the idea of how you do all that. One other thing that I never thought about before, but I've seen this in the Textual Discord channel. Oh yes, let's do yours.
I was just curious what it looks like in the browser at this point. You mentioned that.
It looks very similar to this, but it uses this. I don't have Textual Serve installed, so I can't run it. But the apps, if you go to textualize.io, they show them running in the web. In fact, I think they have some live ones you can test out, and you'll see they look very similar to that. What was I going to say? Oh yes, depending on your terminal. Some terminals do emoji. If you have like command.exe, it's not going to work. It'll just start showing like a junk character. But it does support colors, so you can do a lot of colors in command or your PowerShell for that matter. There are a lot of cross-platform terminals, so if you want them to be like really fancy, you can get like Warp. There's one called Kitty, Alacrity. I think Alacrity uses your GPU to create the GUI. The other thing I wanted to mention, because I see this a lot on the Textual channel, is people always are asking, how do you change the font in Textual? Well, Textual doesn't have a way to do that because that's controlled by the terminal. If you want a different different font or anything like that, you control that in your terminal app. You can't control that from Textual because Textual has no hooks into the terminal it's running in. So again, there's some limitations, but you can kind of see here that you can do a lot in your terminal. You can create a pretty colorful UI. This one's really simple, but if you wanted to, you could have all kinds of widgets in here. Like I showed earlier, someone's created basically a SQL browser in their terminal, so they could, theoretically go on their server and run SQL queries and verify it's working correctly, even in AWS, I believe. So you give it a try. How am I doing on time? Pretty good. Well, if you guys have questions, I'm happy to talk about Textual, anything regarding it. I think I went a little bit fast because I have a cough and I don't want to cough too much.
I'll bring you a mic.
Okay, cool. He's first and then this guy.
Sorry.
I was just curious how you would implement removing one of these rows from this application, if that was like a user story you were given.
I believe there's an unmount. So I think you can call unmount here. See if it'll autocomplete. Of course not. Anyway, I'm pretty sure there's an unmount method that you call.
You just have to look it up then.
Yeah, you'd look up you query which row, in this case, which row widget, and you just unmount it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well,
I was just wondering, you mentioned that Textual uses CSS for styling.
Oh, yes.
Do the widgets kind of have like a default styling? And
Yep.
is there a way to sort of place the widgets, or how does that kind of work?
So it's not like a what you see is what you get kind of thing where you can say pixel perfect, this is where it's going to be. You kind of use those containers, like the vertical container. There's a grid container. If you need more precise location of the widgets, you can just create that and then nest the vertical or horizontal containers inside of the grid even. You can get pretty complex. You can create, and then you can lay it out how you like. And then when you resize the window, it'll resize mostly appropriately. Of course, you're going to hit eventually a size that doesn't work because again, it's text-based and it just doesn't work that well for too small. But you can actually set, a minimum width, and then you can have it pop up like a dialog and say, hey, you made it too small. This size is not working. I was going to show the CSS since you mentioned that. I didn't talk about that at all. Okay, so the CSS, basically just stick it in let's go back over here quick. You set the CSS path here. We call it textual CSS, so it has TCSS, but you can use the CSS if you want to. You don't have to use TCSS. That's just the way the documentation does it. But it doesn't fully implement regular CSS. It's specialized for textual. So I think that's why he recommends doing it that way. Anyway, in this case, I'm going to select the weather app, which is that weather class at the top. And then you can set different background, height, margin, padding, border. And then if you need to select specific widgets, use that same syntax as before, the hashtag, and then the widget name, and then you just add your CSS as necessary. And there's a lot of documentation around this that shows how to change colors and whatnot in there. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think it's Control P. In any textual application, you can bring up the palette, and you can change the theme. There's some different themes included with textual. So we can change the theme to some degree. Which one is a light? It makes it a white color. And you can create your own themes too. So it's up to you how creative you want to be. Do we have any other questions? I know there's some beginners in here, so if you want to talk beginner Python questions, I can do those too. I mean, we have like 45 minutes, I think. So. All right, I'm not hearing anything. So, oh wait, there's somebody. Don't be scared, we don't bite.
So has anyone, tried to hijack the CSS within Textual to do Tailwind CSS or anything fancy like that?
Not that I'm aware of. I have seen someone who was
Kind of fun.
doing an animation. He'd animated his. It's called the line API, and you can make it basically do like a game in your terminal, so to speak. He was, having scrolling dots and like a wave. You can create a graph, for example, in your terminal using the line API, for example.
So, yeah, beginner here. I'm not as much following the code as much, but from the actual application side of things, what are some of the types of applications that you would see in the real world? I mean, no offense to a weather app, it's like it's already, you know, on the
Yeah.
on the desktop. What sort of applications do you see for running this type of a thing in terminal in the real world? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, like I said, there's that guy who created the textual DuckDB viewer and querier. That could be really useful. Oh, what was that thing called? See if I can find it. Post, that's what it was. It was a really cool, I think it's called Postman or something. Yeah, HTTP client like Postman. I don't think, what is it called?
Are you thinking about posting?
Yeah, posting, I think that's what it is. That one actually looks really cool. Yeah, Darren, he used to work for Textual. So you might use this if you don't want to pay for Postman. This does pretty much everything Postman does. And lets you run post, get, test out your API queries, see what's coming back, check it all out. This is probably one of the best examples I know of that you'd use it for, off the top of my head. But like I said, if you go to the Textual website, they have a bunch of projects on here. Like the Datadog one, that would probably be useful if you use Datadog. I saw somebody created something, I think they call it Bagels. And I don't know why he called it that, but it's basically an exercise app. So it helps you track what you're eating and how much exercise you're doing per day. And so you can put that all in there. And I saw someone else create a personal finance app. And so you can put in, you know, I'm spending my money on X, Y, and Z. I think you just download, you know, your CSV from your bank, and then it loads it into that Textual app, and then you can tag it and sort it, and you can see, you know, I probably drink too much Starbucks per week, or you know, whatever. So there's definitely some cool things. I used it at work, but I'm probably not at liberty to talk about those. But there are definitely some neat things you can do that are real world with it.
Yeah, I was wondering what like tooling you recommend in your local environment for managing, say, your version of Python, including like don't care, just run the installer and get the most recent version, or what you recommend for like requirements and managing requirements for a project. Kind of what are the things you like to have in place when you start a Python project and tools that you would recommend?
If you have a really simple project, you can get away with just using requirements.txt. That just lists out and pins which versions of which dependencies you need. That doesn't take care of problems where you have packages that have sub-dependencies, and sometimes the sub-dependencies conflict with each other. In that case, you should use something like Poetry, because that will create a log file, and it'll help manage all those interdependencies that can really screw up your app. I think UV or OV from Astral is kind of pounding on Poetry a little bit. I think that'll probably be the tool to watch out for. It'll eventually probably do everything that Poetry does, but it's not there yet. So that particular tool is written in Rust, but it's for Python, and it, you know, it's 100 times faster than anything Python based. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, you bet.
Cool. Yes. Oh, yes. Get up there, Matt.
Thank you.
So this is a Python half textual question. The yield command that you use to load the widgets, is there a reason we're not initializing the classes instead? Or why is it just yielding?
So we are initializing them. It's just not very obvious. So you initialize the widget, you're creating an object here, and then you yield it out. The reason they do this is that in textual land, underneath the covers, it's written with the async IO library. And so everything, a lot of the internals are based around generators. And so when you see the yield keyword, you know that this is a generator. It's going to yield items one by one. And so you create that instance, and you yield it out. And if you want to keep track of that instance, that's when you apply the ID to it. So like this is probably bad code. I don't have an ID on this one because I don't care. But if it's a widget I want to change in the future, you'll probably want to add an ID to it, and your IDs have to be unique so that you can then query for it later using their DOM, basically.
I have another question. Would you recommend Textual for a computing intensive application?
Sure. I don't see any reason why it couldn't do that. Like I said, you run it in threads, it'll be fine. And I believe 3.14 is coming soon, which removes the GIL. So theoretically, you'll be able to start using processes as well, multiple threads and multiple processes at the same time. Hopefully they'll get the sub-interpreter thing figured out and we can start using those as well and they can share memory. That's like the dream, but I don't think that's coming probably for another year or two.
Cool.
But yeah, I don't see any reason why textual would be a limitation or something like that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This one, maybe I went over here too, Matt.
Real quick, does Textual have any like testing libraries that could simulate user actions or anything like that?
Yes, it does. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but they use PyTest. They actually have a pretty extensive framework, and they also have, I think it's textual-snapshot. And what that does is it takes an SVG snapshot of whatever's on the screen so that you can compare and see if you broke the rendering in your app using that. So you take a snap, and it works with PyTest. So they basically wrote a PyTest plugin to get your golden image and then compare it every time you do a PR, basically. But yeah, there's a way to do it. And there's lots of tests to look at, too. I think this fellow.
I was just going to yell. You mentioned there are some features in Poetry that UV doesn't have yet. Do you have any specific examples?
No, I don't use Poetry enough, but I know that, so I'm more familiar with what it doesn't have with like rough versus Pylint. Pylint has a bunch of plugins that haven't been converted to rough. And so I'm assuming that's probably something similar with Poetry where they just haven't hit the 99% yet. I think they're closer to 80% or so. So there's still some work there yet. But one of the things I like about is that you can just basically give it a URL and a command, I think it's wx, and it'll download and run that code kind of in its own container in a way. And that's really cool. That's a really nice way to just test something out and not install anything locally. Which does beat Poetry in that respect. Okay, anyone else want to throw a curveball at me? Oh, here we go. See what you got.
Hopefully not a curveball. If I've got an application that sometimes I want to run it interactively like this, but other times I just want to dump the output to a text file, does Textualize have a way to toggle that, or would I have to do that outside of the library?
For me, I would probably just write a CLI application that I can call, and then I believe there's actually a package. It's like textual click, I think. And you can use that to wrap around your CLI and turn it into a textual app. And so in that case, you create your click app, which is basically a CLI application that you can run headlessly, so to speak. And if you want to run it with textual, you run it with textual click, and it'll turn it into the textual app for you.
Nice. Thank you.
Any other questions?
This is more for you, Matt. Do we know when the next event is?
Yes, we do. It will be the 4th Thursday of next month. I don't know the number off the top of my head. We do have a speaker lined up, so stay tuned. And yeah, check out our socials. Yeah, it'll get blasted out there. 27th, February 27th. Anything else?
If you don't
All
want to ask questions in front of this big crowd, you can just come talk to me afterwards too. That's totally cool.
All right. Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Right. Feel free to help yourself to some more pizza, some more drinks, some swag that we have. And yeah, definitely fill out a card, give us some feedback, volunteer to speak in April and May and June and July and August and so on. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.